Welcome to this DRSS conversation, which happens at a time when the program enters a new phase with the upcoming MAS and CAS, which we want to talk about in a second. For this reason, I am glad to greet Tobias Luthe, the Program Director of DRSS. Welcome, Tobias.
Thank you, Michael, for leading this conversation. I'm looking forward.
We want to talk about the upcoming months and years that are very important for the DRSS program. But before we talk about the further evolution of the program, let's go back to the basic question. Why do we need DRSS?
Yeah, thank you, Michael, for this conversation. The DRRS program is such a fascinating endeavor and learning system that we've been building up together with our colleagues over the last years, actually. And the current times just show how important it is to think out of the box even more. So nested crises, from climate change to biodiversity loss to wars to demographic change to value change, it's all like multiple nested crises, and they accelerate each other all the time. So the world is getting more complex, more complicated. How do we navigate in this complexity? What kind of tools, what kind of methods, what kind of cultures, what kind of communities do we need to be able to navigate in this complexity? And DRRS about designing, so a creative approach to deal and to relate with these complexities, to find a navigation tool, to be able to create and co-create something that is resilient against these changes and same time working towards a regenerative future. So it's a whole array of navigation tools and cultures and views and worldviews to navigate in this time of complexities.
You've sharply or roughly outlined what the program is all about, but can you entail it a bit more? What is the program all about?
So the four terms: designing resilient regenerative systems. Systems, obviously, we talk about basically anything that's social ecological. We humans, nature, technical systems, economic systems, social systems, ecosystems, they are all combined and coupled, so we cannot separate them. So it's a whole view on relationalities, on complex systems, on different scales of decision-making, of governance, from the tiniest product like a bottle, like clothing, to food, to the question how we design community cities, to the question what's a future economy that's regenerative on a regional scale. So the designerly part of it is basically a creative approach of moving stepwise forward, of experimenting in uncertainty without complete knowledge. And so DRRS has this notion of creatively engaging in complexity towards a better, a regenerative future. And we have three main elements in this program. One is a MOOC series, a massive open online series, which is basically a very accessible, free of costs way to engage in this content in a global community of, for now, more than 100 nations in the program. And then there's the executive program, which is a new program. It feeds from the MOOC, and it leads to a Master of Advanced Studies by ETH Zurich. And the first element is a CAS, a Certificate of Advanced Studies, and more of these CAS make then up the future master program. And the kind of bridging element is the community, the DRS community, which is an online community, and it has a lot of discourse, a lot of learning groups, also regional-based, where people live in their own bioregion. And obviously, we host live events on these communities. You get support, also asynchronously. So three main elements: the MOOC series, an executive program, and a virtual community that form the core of the DRRS program.
That's quite a complexity in itself. We are going to talk about the master program later. But so far as I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, DRSS is hybridizing science, praxis, design, and other forms of embodiment. We will come to that later too. Can you elaborate on that a bit more?
DRRS is hybridizing science, design, transformative praxis, and we're coming here from ETH Zurich, so we are a science-based academic institution, and we need science. We need to base our acting and our discourse on the current state of knowledge, which is science. At least one established body of knowing is science. We talk about different ways of knowing and reasoning, so we also need to open up to say, yes, that's our way to do science. That's like a global, globally agreed upon way to form a body of common knowledge, science, and this is the basis of what we're doing. And in addition, we also need different ways of knowing that relate to complexities from a different perspective. For example, tacit knowledge, something that we feel, intuition, local knowledge, indigenous knowledge. So these elements that are hard to quantify and put in a science framework, we need to listen to that too and balance both. And then we need the way to designers work, and designers often work by intuition, by interest. Designers experiment and do basically research by design. So it's about, let's just try and see what happens, because we cannot wait until we have the proper data. And we also know, meanwhile, that the proper data, whatever that means, is also not enough to actually act fast enough. And that brings in the transformative praxis part. We need to have impact right now. We don't have any more time to wait until we have better data. We need to work with what we have right now. And DRRS is hybridizing the tools and cultures of science, Western science, also of different ways of knowing, including indigenous knowledge, including tacit knowledge, of a designerly approach to creatively deal with uncertainties, and all of this to inform right away transformative praxis.
Sounds very new and innovative. So what has been the reaction by the scientific world so far? The course has been perceived very good on the student side. I think a couple of thousand participants in the MOOC have been registered. What is your conclusion so far after 2 MOOCs on the DRRS learning program from the scientific world?
I mean, we base our way of knowing on science, and that's absolutely important. And so, from my perspective, we need to do our homework, and whenever we come into a discourse, we need to say and to find out what's actually the common state of knowing and discussion on a certain topic. And best is to make it explicit with an example. If we talk about a mobility transformation and we talk about electric mobility, it doesn't matter so much what my opinion is on batteries and on lithium, on rare minerals. It matters what's the science behind it. And so we can very well say, well, let's read about that accessible science and say, well, that is the current notion on, let's say, a life cycle analysis perspective, a holistic perspective on electric car batteries right now, today, with the current electricity grid and mix. So based on this scientific knowledge, we can then zoom out and say, well, what does it mean for us right now? And what else comes in? And there's different factors that come in, including cultures, traditions, personal beliefs, preferences. And we need to look at both. We need to have a science base, we need to zoom out and try to include the other elements and come to a kind of joint collaborative process. And so it's been, of course, a change in cultures to say, yes, we do this, and in addition, we accept more different ways that for now are a bit underrepresented, including different ways of knowing, including the notion that we cannot understand everything by better science. We need the science, and at the same time, we also need to open up, see patterns, see structures, accept worldviews, and also accept that many things we don't know and we won't know. So we have to somehow navigate in complexity and uncertainty and find ways to deal with that. And that at the end is also an inner perspective, an inner development perspective. And that's very different from what we're teaching right now. Because we often teach and live the culture of we, as scientists, look at that system there. We analyze that system, we are independent. And then we often look at fragments of these complex systems and look at the disciplinary depth of them, which is totally important and of course right to do, and we need this disciplinary depth. In addition, we need to understand, well, we need to look much more at relationalities, at synergies, and have a different epistemological viewpoint on complex systems. And that's a cultural shift, which very important to state. It's not about not doing any more what we're doing currently. It's about doing what we're current in highest performance and skills, and really understanding these disciplinary methods and using that data in a very accurate way and transparent way. That's science. And in addition, zoom out, understand more about the context, about the pluralities, and about the real world, where something is totally different than we sometimes teach.
This cultural shift you just mentioned can be expressed in this wobbly grid. I think this is already a symbolic picture of the DRRS. Everybody who already had the joy to take part in the DRRS program knows the wobbly grid. Can you give us an example for a specific application that somehow interprets this wobbly grid thing?
This DRRS wobbly grid is really a fascinating organic representation of DRRS, and I have to thank our colleague Christina Swat, who graphically designed this wobbly grid and also had the idea for it. At the end, it stands for a network, so relationalities, and it's more like an open grid. It's a circle, a tunnel. You see a pathway of the future, a vision. And then this whole thing moves all the time. It's like living, it's an organic organism. And so it changes its shape all the time. And whenever we try to grab it somewhere with a tweezer, it will just change shape and wobble away, a bit like a jellyfish. So you try to grab it, it just changes structure. And this, to us, is a metaphor for how to deal with complexities. We're still often trying to fix that problem there tomorrow with a specific data set and tool. And we know that this is often not possible. It's one part of the trajectory. But what we need to learn and to embed as our evolving cultures is understanding that these complex systems, they can only be transformed and moved if we simultaneously, in the same time, activate the system on multiple fronts with different ways, different methods, different approaches, different data sets, different skill sets, but really simultaneously, and each of these entry points matters and counts because they relate with each other. And together they create this momentum to move this wobbly, changing thing forward. And I like to think about, maybe a jellyfish that's hovering and moving and wobbly, and we cannot just take it, even with 2 fingers, we cannot take it. 2 methods, not enough. But a fishing net where we grab it and bring the whole thing forward, that's what we're trying to do. And that's why we need this plurality of approaches, worldviews, methods, science design, transformative praxis to advance such a system. And an example from the real world is an economy that's more resilient, regenerative, that functions on a regional level, bi-regional focus, and that could be hemp, industrial hemp. And hemp is such a fascinating plant. It has a potential to transform our economy on many sectors, from the building sector, building materials, insulation materials, to fabrics, for composite materials such as skis, for clothing, hemp, such as this is a hemp pant, for example, to food, protein in food, if it's from seeds and nuts to oils, to health sector, cosmetic sector, CBD oil, and also to improvements in the agriculture sector, in land use, landscape perspective. So multiple elements that make up the hemp ecosystem and its potential to transform our economy to be more regenerative. Often we develop and focus on one of these elements, for example, building materials, which is likely the biggest aspect of the hemp economy. so developing new building materials. And that's what we have to do. That's a very disciplinary, scientific, also designerly work that needs to be done to create the basis. But this is not enough, because we also need good supplies. We don't grow enough hemp. Where to grow hemp? It's against established cultures and traditions, especially in rural areas. There's still a notion of hemp being a drug. Industrial hemp is no drug. And so on. So there's many things that are super complex, and we have a chance if we activate all these elements of the hemp system simultaneously, supply, demand, different industry sectors. And then we can move this whole thing forward, and the impact is systemic, meaning it's much more than the addition of the elements. It's about the relationalities that make up the greater impact. And so the hemp ecosystem is a wonderful example for a DRRS kind of transforming a wobbly complex system simultaneously with multiple interaction ways, tools, cultures, and ways of knowing and reasoning.
One of the premises when we are talking about DRSS is reframing. It appears all the time when I'm talking to you and we're discussing things. Can you explain what you really mean with reframing?
Reframing is such a fascinating concept, and it was also brought in our MOOC series by some of our colleagues. So it's really changing the perspective. We like to not talk about simplifying complexity, which is a current notion. Something complex, well, we can chop it up, slice it up in small pieces, and say, well, each piece is not so complex and complicated. So let's look at this. You know, we can understand this and this fragment, and then we put it together again. That's often what we do, simplifying complexity. But then we lack about the relations in between. We lack a big part, maybe the biggest part even, of a complex system. Reframing instead says, well, let's accept as it is, let's somehow play with it. As Donella Meadows said, let's dance with it. So let's make like a new habit out of this complexity. And we can manifest it in different ways. It could be, since we talked about mobility transformation and electric mobility types, if I drive an electric car, which by no means is the perfect solution for the future, but it's an intervention right now that makes sense at this point. And so people would ask me, so how long do you charge when you drive like from here a couple of hours to somewhere? And then I would say, yeah, well, I have to charge maybe 2 times for 30, 40 minutes. And then I would count as, oh, it's 1.5 hours more time. Yes, that's one way to look at it. And I could get annoyed and say, well, I'm in a hurry, it's too long. A reframing perspective would mean, well, by having these charging times, I really understand, I learn a different way of traveling. I learn slow travel. I say, okay, these breaks are really healthy, because sitting 6 hours without getting up is not healthy. I can get up, I can do some gymnastics, some yoga. I can talk to people and see, where am I actually? I'm not just busting through, but I get in relation, in contact with the place where I stop. I can develop habits if I revisit this place. So reframing complexity helps me to take the good out of a given situation and take the energies, the natural energies, and use them in a way that is healthy. So it's really this beautiful notion of dancing with system is a reframing perspective, and it starts in our own head.
And it's maybe a precondition for unlearning things. So normally we all are trained to plan our day with all the dates, with all the duties we are obliged to, and maybe we have to, as you say, embrace uncertainty again. But that needs us to do something we are not familiar with, unlearning the learned. So and that is actually also a notion that you always use, the unlearn expression. What does it really entail? It's another very important piece in the DRSS learning system, isn't it?
Unlearning is I think, a key skill, a key culture to acquire for us. And we are often used after some trainings, after apprenticeships, after studying, after work experience, that we are experts. I mean, we're all experts. And so this expertise is often seen as a linear pathway. We trained, we have experience, this study, these working years, and then we're an expert. And it often comes to notion like, well, I don't know about this, but I know about this, so please don't enter my garden, my boundaries of expertise. So what we are more and more aware of today is that because of these uncertainties in nested crisis and dealing with these complex systems, we're learning all the time, again and again. And it starts in our mindset of saying, yes, we are all experts now in a certain element, and there's always something where we are not experts anymore, or our expertise is evolving, and we have to continuously learn. So I like this notion of being lifelong students of systems. And I want to stay a student attitude all my life. And we are lucky we work with many types of students together in universities, in learning environments. So it's around our culture, but still it's important to step back and say, well, that's what I learned, that's what I saw, that's rich, that's valid, but things are moving faster and faster. So for me, learning about sustainability, studying sustainability, 20 years ago, there's a certain way we learned it. There's many years of experience, of research, of publications. And so you really get somehow and are really accustomed to your own expertise. And then things move, things change, we have new knowledge. There's also science. We know more, hopefully, tomorrow than today. That's science. And so unlearning to me in this discussion means, I think, pausing, opening up, being aware that we are all experts, but there's always something where we need to relearn. And tomorrow, we might hopefully be wiser than today. And that's a culture to acquire. And in the field of sustainability, we have it also in our MOOC content, is that for example, what I learned, what I was taught, where sustainability originates from in forestry 300 years ago, that's only part of the knowledge today. It dates back 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 years. And has been, for me, a long unlearning journey, but it builds the cultures of making this habit.
That also means that the sustainability movement itself is evolving, is developing, which brings me to another very important concept, the concept of organic emergence. Can you explain it a bit? What is it really all about?
Organic emergence is really fascinating. It's a bit hard to grab, but it has two components, organic and emergence. Emergence relates to our discussion of nested crisis and uncertainties and complexities. We cannot really plan and control what's happening. We sometimes still think we can, but we have to find different ways of accepting this complexity and somehow live with it. So emergence, the situations, the future is very uncertain, and it gets more complex and even faster. So to be accepted, we will not be able to plan by better data. We need better data, and we also need different cultures to deal with it. So it's an acceptance of unplannability. And the organic part is how do we accept and deal with this? And this comes back to our own inner development at the end. The feeling that we will be able to deal with it. It will be okay. We accept this unplannability, and we accept that we will not be able to solve something tomorrow with the tools we have today, but it will come back and again and again. So it's a continuity. It's uncertain. We don't like that. We don't like uncertainty. So it's a big cultural shift, and it's a big shift inside. And we're learning together ways how to acquire this organic emergence. And we use different didactics to acquire this organicness, this inner feeling, this inner security, feeling somehow safe, that we will be able to deal with uncertain situations in the future.
And this also has to do with the inner development, as you said. It's a personal quest, and with the quest we come to a very important didactic, which has been cheered widely in the first MOOCs, The participant really liked it. What is the quest really all about, and which role will it play in the upcoming MAS?
The quest, spanning from the word question, is a very, very cool tool. And for me, I was inspired by Quest University in Squamish, British Columbia. 20 years ago, they have a university called Quest, and it's based on a question. So what they did at that time, at least, was that mentors help the students in the first year to try everything, everything, but help them then to develop a set of questions that guide their interest. In the second year, the mentors would help them to direct different modules and teaching aspects around this quest. We've been using it for actually also 20 years in different courses and tuning it a bit. And so in this DRRS program, the quest is our main navigation tool. It's a metacognitive, so a very conscious process of aligning our interests, our questions that evolve, and our learning content aside a kind of spine. The spine that's moving and that's organic, and it takes feedback loops back and forth, but it guides our interest. And it's a tool of self-development which helps us to have a metacognitive, so a consciously steered process of our own learning pathways. And participants are nudged, are encouraged to develop a quest from day one on. And they're being helped by us, by the team, also by the community, to formulate questions again and again and again. They change, different hierarchies of questions, clustering questions, and some have this big question in mind already, some are searching for it. And so it's a moving tool, and it helps for them to direct the different content aspects and also the kind of transformative design project, both in the MOOC, but especially in the executive program, in the MIS and CIS, to find direction again and again. I like to call it like a mountaineering trip. You're planning to reach that summit, you have the map, and your quest is somehow, okay, my quest, my goal, my aim is I would like to reach the summit today with the given means. And then I plan things, but things change on the pathway. There's different milestones, weather changes, we're getting tired, the route might be more difficult. So we have to align and reframe and re-question all the time, but at the end it's what brings us forward.
It's a very good bridge to the next question, because you say that the quest is not only developed in front of the computer and not only developed by yourself, but also in groups. And one of the didactics you use to develop these quests is not only mountaineering, but the systemic cycles program or approach. What is systemic cycles really all about?
So part of the DRRS didactics are different ways of embodying complexity. And we have different ways of embodying complexity. It's for sure becoming part of a system, understanding we are part of this. We're not looking at that system there, but it's all connected. So it's about relationalities and feeding them with different senses. So we have certain physical activation, including mountaineering, including just being outside. Systemic cycles, it's one of these embodiment types, which is basically a way to use your bicycle and ride your bicycle where you are. So exploring the spaces around you. Ideally, getting an understanding of the region where we are, where we live, connecting with the land, with people, with processes, with the environment, with ourselves. Because cycling, as we know, is a fantastic tool to move fast enough to cover some distance, but also slow enough to actually get in touch with people, with things, to stop anywhere, to be curious, to ask questions. What's the landscape being used for? What do we produce here? What is flying there? Who are you? What are you doing with the land? Etc., etc. So it's a whole culture of riding your bicycle in a more or less slow way, of getting in touch with land, with people, and also with ourselves, because we know riding a bicycle is often hard. Also an electric bicycle. So there's different ways to activate our physical system, and it helps to spur the creativity in our mental system. And that brings us to this term of flow, different types of flow experiences, where we can have a physical flow where we activate our body, where we work, we come beyond our comfort zones in a kind of learning zone where things may be hard. And we get back in our comfort zone, and this feels good. That's a kind of flow. And the physical flow connects with the mental flow. So it's a very rich array, systemic cycle of a physical activation, embodying systems. It's about connecting with ourselves. It's an inner development tool, and we can span further from that. And it's a way to enact with the region on very different realms, alone, in community, and get a notion of what does it actually mean to possibly design an economy that's more resilient and regenerative, because this bioregional focus is so imminent in our cross-scale decision-making governance process.
We talked about a lot of didactics now and key notions from the MOOC series. When we now turn our look to the upcoming master program, how does it differ from the MOOC? Are all these didactics and notions we just discussed part of it? And if yes, in what way does it differ from the MOOC series in intensity or in depth of knowledge?
The DRRS program, or learning ecosystem, has the three elements: the MOOC series, the executive program, certificate of advanced studies, and the future master of advanced studies, and the DRRS learning community. And they're all blended and bridged and connected together. The MOOC series is what we started with. That's a globally accessible virtual program that anybody, anywhere can take without costs. And it's pre-recorded, it's video lectures, it's short movies, it's readings, it's sketching work, it's audio books, it's different podcasts, so very different elements that are somehow bracketed, put together by also a kind of quest, so the personal question and interest that we nudge throughout the way. It has a designerly component of actually mapping a learning progress. It's called giga mapping. So it's like a visual dialogue that each participant is nudged, invited to proceed, to actually make sense and connect all the different, pre-recorded content. And there's the online community, which obviously helps to then find your learning cohort, your learning group, and actually have a kind of physical relation, either virtually in the community and also physically where this participant lives. So that's totally free in terms of your own learning progress, your pace, your speed is really student focused, the pace and such. Anybody can do it, and it's designed at least iteratively on a level that's really very accessible. It's the most accessible learning tool that we can offer. Anywhere, anytime, for free. And from this previous invitation, we then, as you can, we like to frame it like a tree. There's the big crown of the tree and the branches and all the foliage, and it's like huge. It like captures from the air nutrients, water, gas, whatever. And that's the MOOC system. And then some of these elements, nutrients, water, whatever, enter the trunk and go into the root system. So then it gets really deep, deep down, and we dig in and go deeper and see all the hidden elements. And so the executive program, the CAS, the MAS, that's some kind of getting from this huge MOOC system in a funnel and the trunk and then into the soil system and looking at root causes, digging much deeper. So we use the similar content structure of the MOOC in the executive program, and then we go much deeper. We have conversations, we form a cohort, we learn together, we deepen the quest, we invite additional speakers and experts from academics, from design, from praxis, and then we really mentor and coach on the deep personal quest processes of each participant. And part of this process, this deepening down to the soil, is then the physical interaction. And there's two main elements. One is obviously that participants are encouraged and supported to build their own physical kind of learning environment where they are, where they live, because this executive program can be taken from anywhere elsewhere in the world to avoid all this unneeded flying around. So let's say someone is in Colombia. This person can take this executive program from there virtually with the content and the live conversations that we have, and help themselves by developing a curricular learning group and by practicing much of the content in reality. For example, systemic cycles, using a bicycle, connecting with the region, making physical contacts regarding your quest and the future project can happen physically, right there. And the second element is these field design trips. So each of the CAS leading to a future master program entail a 1 week to 10 days physical field design trip where we actually meet together and we have a kind of experiential pedagogical approach to really connecting with each other and with the systems we are in, and applying and practicing the theory, the methods, the design approaches, and being with practitioners and being also a practitioner for a while and really getting dirty hands.
And which target group is this course actually addressing?
The DRRS program is a program that's very systemic, that focuses on relations. It brings in and together different ways of knowing reasoning. It attaches to different discipline knowledge types. It is about using science, employing science. It's also about designery ways of acting, and it's also about transformative impact. So we really feed from different ways and different cultures, different disciplines, different sectors. And so it's almost easy to say what is not relevant. In a systemic understanding, everything is relevant. The more diverse the audience, the more different expertise types we bring in, and the more we can learn from and with each other, if curated, obviously, in an adequate way. So what we like to do is saying first, yes, it's a systemic program, so we are learning to befriend complexity, to zoom out, and hover, have the view from above, and understand structures and patterns and root causes, and zoom in on details, on disciplines that matter most. For example, we talked about this hemp economy, hemp ecosystem as one example for a wobbly, complex, transformative system. We need to have this whole systemic view of saying, how can we design and implement a hemp-based economy? And that's a very relational context, because all of these given examples matter and they have to play together to create this energy to move it forward. And then we need some kind of disciplinary depth of saying, well, we need a new building material that is, let's say, a load-bearing brick based on hemp shafts that's both insulating and at the same time load-bearing, certain compression strength, and that's a very disciplinary technical material development. And we need life cycle assessment, for example, as a method to understand the ecological consequences over the entire lifespan. So we combine this disciplinary depth from someone coming from that field, both participants and teachers, and then we connect this with different knowledge types. And there might be someone from psychology or from public services, from agriculture, how to bring this over, this knowledge, and how to connect it with the activation of the system. So this shall be an example of different expertise, different study backgrounds that come together in our program. We help to make sense of relationalities, and it leads over to different personas. So we cannot say who is not relevant. Right. We can say examples of who is relevant. And the personas maybe is the easiest accessible way to find oneself and oneself's potential role in such a program.
But still, maybe we can give a few examples on how the learned is going to be applied in the real world. Maybe you know one of two personas that could fit into this frame of DRSS.
There are different, say, personas, illustrative personas that we can construct for this program. And we have some examples. They are actually alumni of the MOOC program. And I mean, idealistic way, someone took the MOOC and says, oh, that's actually, alluring, that's interesting. Now I'm hungry, I want more. And I feel this is really needed, and I'm attracted by that. So, for example, and very concrete, there is one person who is from Slovenia. And this person worked abroad in different countries, is maybe mid-30, and is an expert, has studied, has a work experience, an expert in certain fields, and then goes back in their home region, a mountain regions in the Slovenian mountains, and finds a situation that is not going in a very good direction. So certain crises manifest in that mountain regions, different types. For example, climate change and more droughts, for example, a problem of influx in tourism after COVID or with COVID, and a problem of an economic system that's let's say going in a quantitative direction that's not supportive for biodiversity. And so this person then says, well, I'm working with the mayor to improve that system in a way of sustainability, even of regeneration. And then they agree, yes, that's needed, let's do it. And then this person said, oh, wait, but that's actually really difficult. Where do I start? And so this person would then come back and say, we have this DRRS program. We are learning here and learning together how to deal with complexities and design for resilience and regeneration. And so this person would come back and be a super candidate for a master program because the person is an expert. He or she brings in a lot of expertise from this field, from these topics, the disciplines, but also from that bioregion and the sector, for example, tourism. And so this person then is being coached and nudged and mentored by our program to define their quest, which could be improving that bioregion, and get support to have transformative impact from day one on, because any method, any tool, any knowledge this person will try to implement right away and learning by doing, so a designerly approach in that region. And that's one example. So for the community is actually a big plus, because they not only get a motivated expert, as this person is, but they get the whole DRRS program and learning ecosystem behind. So us at ETH and all the other instructors and teachers from different institutions coming in, and all the learning community, the other participants with all their knowledge and experience, enriching together in dialogue and getting certain methods and tools and also certain cultures to then implement and practice in terms of interventions incrementally in that system there. And then they would feed back to the system, to the ecosystem. And then there's another person who is also teaching in our program already. So these people can be teachers and participants. And this person comes from a French community, from a French city, having a political role in that city. And so saying, well, lots of experience, super rich experiences on various fronts, how to transform already a city, a complex city with 100,000 people, let's say. And then there's something else missing, the next step. So this person comes, enters the program and says, well, I want to get the support of the whole program. I want to be nudged by all the contributors with the latest state of sustainability science, of designerly ways of reasoning, of tools, etc., etc. And this person brings in their own expertise. And so it's really a learning environment where different types of expertise come together. We help to make sense of each other and connect it, and then they implement the change to some impact right away from day on in their own bioregion. And this person from the French city, from political position, might then develop a bioregion learning center and basically spur regenerative processes in their own region by the support of the program. And maybe a last other example might be also alumni of one of the MOOCs coming from the San Francisco region, California, being employed in the tech scene and being possibly laid off because of all the changes and the crisis also in this sector. So tech, AI, etc., etc. And this person also then came back and say, I have to re-navigate. What am I doing in the future? I need a new job because I'm laid off. And same time, the system I've been supporting is actually not what I want to support in the future. You know, how can we use, let's say, these capacities, technologies, AI, etc., for a better world? And so in the DRS program, this person would again get this motivation, this community support, get the science, get the designer tools, get the process tools to make sense and navigate by their own quest into a direction based on their own expertise and knowledge. And that's just 3 personas of many different requests that we're already getting, and everybody can find themselves in this program and take something out of it and bring something back.
Obviously, complexity appears everywhere where international and global tasks come together, and just think of big companies. But thank you very much for these personas and ideas of people who might take this masterclass. But you just mentioned another very interesting point, namely that students become teachers and feed the MOOC, and the MOOC feeds the master development again. You termed it blended learning. Sorry, blended learning was the term. Can you elaborate that more a bit? What is it really all about, the blended learning concept that you evolve together with or within the DRS learning ecosystem?
This DRS program consists of the 3 main elements: the massive open online course series, free and virtual, accessible, the executive program, and the DRS learning community. Both virtual and then also physical. And all of them relate with each other. So we are talking a lot about relationalities, and we're also trying to live these relationalities. So blended learning, blending bridges, means someone ideally who enters this metaphor of the tree, the crown, the branches in the MOOC series, quite a low threshold, very accessible, and own pace, and then says, okay, that's now actually I'm getting interested, now I'm getting hungry. So I'm part of this virtual community and I exchange myself, I find colleagues, friends, I can bring also my own experience. And then I enter maybe the executive program, the first certificate of advanced studies. And I'm already an alumni. And these alumni, of course, they have so much experience themselves, in general in life, professionally, and also because they took this, they went through the crown process into the STEM and exchanged with the community. So they invited then to iterate the MOOC, because we have to iterate and keep it up to date. I mean, things are changing all the time. So we remain lifelong students of systems, and we are walking this talk. So we're creating something where this blended learning concept, that this MOOC series is basically automatically regenerated, updated all the time by an alumni going to the root system of the executive program, coming back and saying, well, I can help to iterate and reiterate a MOOC, I know, once a year, for example. And same time, I can also bring in my own perspective, my experience, maybe a case, maybe from their own quest, what they've been doing. So they become co-teachers. And it's like feeding back, back to the stem, in like nutrients, water back into the crown. And alumni become new teachers. And this ideally, happens autonomously almost. And the DRS community is then obviously a tool to say, well, maybe an alumni would like to host a live talk, or brings in, a podcast, or whatever it is, any kind of model, or offers another practice course physically in their own bioregion where they live. And the community is then the connector and brings it back in. And each of these illustrations can then enter the MOOC and obviously also the executive program.
How's the application process for the CAS Mass? Actually, how do you apply, and what are the preconditions?
To participate in the DRS learning ecosystem, there's different ways to do that. First, obviously, the massive open online course series, the MOOC series, which is free. You can start anytime. The first version, the first iteration of a new MOOC is always teacher-paced. It's in our own rhythm in order to test and prototype and co-develop. It's been taken offline for a while, iterated with help of alumni, and then it's reopened in a student-paced format. So ideally one would take MOOC number 1 or have taken MOOC number 1, exchange and be part of this DRRS online community for further deepening the content and relating and building up a learning cohort, a learning group, and then enter with this MOOC number 1 second participation into Certificate of Advanced Studies number 1, the next one that's starting in September 23. And so there's an application process, obviously, and the process starts this springtime, and there's a certain corridor which is presented on our website on ETH Zurich, and there's a certain process, an established process how to apply for such an executive program. The program then will physically start in autumn, in September 23, and there obviously is about a 13 weeks period, so till beginning of December of this CAS, the first CAS, and it's virtual, and there's every week there's 1 or 2 fixed live conversation meetings that we do from wherever the participant actually lives and hones in from. So this is virtual but live. There's the whole physical learning, regional learning cohort to be built up, and there's this field design trip, which is a core of this executive program. So for CAS number 1, we will meet also in September, quite at the beginning, for a 10 days field trip to the Italian mountains, Italy, Europe. It's the Piedmont region near Turin, at the Italian-French border, and we visit a real-world laboratory, the Monvisa Institute, where we have been engaging for 7-8 years to design and intervene in complex systems on a community scale, on the valley scale, on the regional scale, on the building scale, on the landscape scale, all the way down to material development. So it's a very, very rich, real-world living environment where we will meet and we practice and live this kind of thinking and the theory that we talk so much about. And we do that in an environment that's not controllable. I mean, to a certain amount we know what to expect, but there's always something that cannot be planned for. That's reality. That's something we cannot do at schools in a contained space. This is a lab with open system boundaries. So things will happen that are not plannable, and this is exactly what we need to deal with and learn with. And so core of this practice design field trips, and the CAS number 1 is just one example. We have different real-world laboratories on Mallorca, Bioregional Learning Center, in Norway, Hemsedal, in the Venice region, and they're growing. But the idea is always the same. We're going into a real-world lab environment. We get dirty hands, literally, but also right. We just put the fingers in the soil and learn what regeneration actually entails. We learn about these root causes of the tree trunk and dig in and see what's actually in there, literally, but also physically and directly. And we will get this experience of growing together. We will learn from each other. We have plenty of time to make an open fire, to bake pizza outside together, to climb a peak, to fly a drone and learn a view from above, to cook together and sweat together and discuss together and have this organic emergence time that's not plannable. And that's super rich. To my experience, outdoor pedagogics, much richer to have 10 days together intensively than over months to just meet in a classroom once in a while. No comparison. And so in the content of learning and co-designing in a complex array of a social ecological system, a mountain community, and the regional relationalities, we will develop a serious game. It's one of systemic innovation methodologies that's very designerly, science-based, designerly facilitated. We develop this game on site as a frame. We will play and prototype it together with people. And the core part will be a systemic cycle endeavor, where we use our bicycles and we discover the region, we connect with partners, And we practice the so-called weaving, this connecting, and the question-based curiosity, and building up weaving networks. And we bring this back into finally in the serious game. We have elements of inner development, of compassion trainings. We will experience flow, and we'll tap into maybe repairing a dry stone wall with the local people, maybe helping in some organic agriculture where we grew barley for local beer, maybe helping to comb cashmere goats to then see how actually the wool is being used to weave pullovers up in the mountains. So all these elements that are existing, it's very rich, and this is forming a core, a physical core of this executive program.
We talked about the blended learning concept, in which teachers become students, students become teachers, which is a nice concept, which is very innovative. And a central part, a central concept in itself is the weaving concept you just explained. Again, maybe we can deepen that notion a bit. What do you mean by weaving in detail?
The DRS program has a cross-scale governance approach, meaning there's different decision-making spheres, levels, from raw materials, where they come from, to product development, to buildings, to cities, to landscapes, to regions and transnational cooperation. So we have 8 scales of decision making, and some of them are geographical scales as well. All of them are important and relevant, and they all function as entry point to the DRS program, the learning ecosystem. Each of these decision-making scale has their own complexities and circularities. What we need to practice and inhabit as a culture is a continuous process of zooming deep in all the way into details, including green chemistry, for example, carbon dioxide emissions and embodied carbon in processes and products, and zoom all the way out to transnational cooperation. That's a continuity, zooming in, zooming out, view from above. And then there's one of these 8 scales which is somehow a very important scale, the focal scale, the bioregional scale. The regional scale, and the idea that the regional scale is large enough to be diverse enough to develop a kind of economy that's more resilient and regenerative. And this regional focus and this continuity of zooming in, zooming out across governance scale, that's one of these practices we're trying to embody and to learn. And we like to use the term weaving, like weaving a fabric, weaving a basket for it, because it's a lot about connecting the dots and trying to build relations and form relations. And it manifests a lot in the systemic cycles didactic, when we cycle across a region, meet the region, talk to people, explore and wonder what's happening here, what's growing here, what kind of supply chain systems are connected or linear or need to be more circular. So by asking questions and by visiting people and also by visual dialogues of mapping out connections that maybe don't exist but should exist, we have a practice of weaving. And so weaving, I would say, is a core skill, a core culture, a set of cultures and methods to develop. And we use the systemic cycles as one didactic. We use very embodied practices. So in an executive program, we will actually weave basket. We will weave with wool that we combed ourselves from cashmere goats in the mountains. And we will use our bicycles to weave and connect between people and between supply chains, products, materials, and so on. So weaving, building relations between different types of dots and entities as a core skill of DRS.
Looking forward to these products. Another highlight to the mass is certainly the lineup of teachers, instructors, thought leaders. Can you give us a sneak who is participating or who we can look forward to?
the contributors, various type for the DRRS program. It's a super fascinating group of people. And we are trying to bring in scientists, designers, practitioners from very diverse cultures and places, including indigenous voices. So we're really trying to include bit by bit and more these different voices, because that's part of the program. It's different worldviews, different relations, different ways of knowing and reasoning, different types of professions and experiences. So obviously we really base much of the program on a scientific body of discipline-interdisciplinary knowledge here at ETH Zurich. So it's a rich array of colleagues from many disciplines, and we're trying to bring in a colleague from landscape planning, a colleague from cities and from Future City Lab, from biodiversity, from nature finance, from cell regeneration and physics, from transdisciplinarity, from social network analysis. So different colleagues of different disciplinary expertise, that's one of our base types of knowledge and reasoning, obviously. And we bring in designers, we bring in people who work totally differently, who work by intuition, who are really good at different design disciplines, from obviously what some understand from graphic design, of sketching, of visualizing as one part, but also product design, service design, experience design, communication design, all the way over to systemic design, which then really encompasses much of these designerly skills and cultures together. And we do that from different institutions, like from the Oslo School of Architecture and Design, from Polytechnic Torino, from NC Les Ateliers in Paris, from Delft University of Technology, different partnering schools, different institutions. And we also look into practitioner institutions and groups and networks and individuals. And obviously, one of our closest collaborator and a person I've been learning a lot from is Daniel Christian Wahl, author of Designing Regenerative Cultures, and who obviously is an amazing resource of these types of different knowing and reasoning ways and designing approaches. So Daniel is involved in our program, and there's very different colleagues, and this is a growing network, because alumni of our MOOC program or practitioners from companies, from businesses are invited. Adem from France, for example, invited by Justina Swat, our design researcher and design tutor and designer from NC Les Ateliers Paris. So there's different relations. We bring in mayors from communities. We bring in someone who owns a large campsite, someone from the tech industry. We bring in mountain guides to take us on endeavors of experiencing flow in nature. We bring in self-compassion trainers, inner development practitioners, and systems practitioners, systems thinkers. So let's say a really rich array of different colleagues, people, and we are meeting new colleagues all the time. And it's really important to say that our participants bring in so much expertise themselves. So wherever we see an opportunity, or they see an opportunity, we try to bring in and include and enrich the array of contributors in our learning communities.
Thank you, Tobias. It was really a pleasure talking to you. Sounds really amazing, and I'm looking forward to see all this happening in September, starting in September with the togetherness and coming together in the Italian mountains. I'm looking forward to see all of you soon, and I wish you a good day.